Good day, students. So here in our subject, Facilitating Learner-Centered Teaching, we are now on the Chapter 3, Constructivist Learning Theories. And the first theory we are going to discuss is the Piaget's stages of cognitive development. So before we dive into our main topic, let me read first the learning objectives. So at the end of the virtual discussion, 85% of the students are expected to explain the different stages of development in Piaget's theory of cognitive development, then appreciate the different stages of cognitive development in the form of essay, and lastly, do a research about Lev Vygotsky's The Zone of Proximal Development. So now, Piaget's stages of cognitive development. So the genetic epistemology. So he focuses on how knowledge develop in human organism. So in Piaget's theory, he focuses on how the certain knowledge develop in us human person since from the day we born up until they present. So cognition, it is the mental processes by which knowledge is acquired, elaborate, stored, retrieved, and used to solve problems. So to make it short, cognition is the mental or cognitive process by which we obtain the knowledge and how we use that knowledge into the real life situation. The next term is the cognitive development. It refers to the changes that occur in children's mental skills and abilities over time. So it is the changes in our mental processes over the time we develop since we are born up to the present. So the changes at that certain period of time is called the cognitive development. Next, the basic cognitive concepts. First, the schema. It refers to the cognitive structures by which individuals intellectually adapt to and organize their environment. So, here in schema, it is, example of this is the way how you adapt to the new environment, how you intellectually adapt to the new environment. For example, you are first year right now, right? And then it is new environment for you, the college life. So how did you adapt on that? How did you intellectually adapt on that certain environment is what we call schema. The next is the assimilation. This is the process of fitting a new experience into an existing or previously created cognitive structure or schema. Next is the accommodation. This is the process of creating new schema. So let's proceed with cognitive development, Piaget's theory of cognitive development. So in Piaget's stages of cognitive development, there are 4 stages in all, in which Piaget's believed that if makuan nato ni siya tanan nga stages, we are a fully developed human person. So the first stage is the sensory motor stage, ranging from the birth to 2 years old. Then, the second stage, the pre-operational stage, ranging from 2 to 7 years old. And then the stage 3, complete operations from 7 to 11 years old. And the last stage is the formal operations, ranging from 11 and so on. So, the first stage of Piaget's stages of cognitive development is the sensory motor stage. The first stage corresponds from birth to infancy. This is the stage when a child who is initially reflexive in grasping, sucking, and reaching becomes more organized, and then in these movements and activities, the term sensory motor focuses on the permanence of the senses and muscle movement through which the infant comes to learn from himself and the world. And then in this stage, there are 6 substages. The reflexes, the stage 1, the reflexes ranging 0 to 1 months. The stage 2 ranging from 1 to 4 months, primary circular reaction. Stage 3, 4 to 8 months, secondary circular reaction. Stage 4, 8 to 12 months, the purposeful coordination of secondary schemes. Stage 5, the 12 to 18 months, tertiary circular. And lastly, the stage 6, 10 to 24 months, mental solutions. So, here is a picture or a diagram representing the primary, secondary, and the tertiary circular reaction. So in the first picture, the baby sucks his thumb. And right after he sucks his thumb, he enjoys sucking his thumb. That's why he continues doing sucking his thumb. That is what we call the primary circular reaction, or an action and the response involves the baby's or the infant's body. And here and in the second picture, the baby coos. When we say coos, the baby produces a soft sound or acute sound. And then he notices that there is a person who is smiling out of the sound he created. That is what we call the baby sees another person smiling or reacting through because of his action, and the baby repeatedly doing that action so that he continued seeing the response of the person. That is what we call the secondary circular reaction. The action and the response from the another person or object leading to the baby's repeating the original action. And here in the last picture, the baby steps on a rubber duck. And the rubber duck squeaks, and the baby squeezes the rubber ducks. So that is what we call the tertiary circular reaction. Action gets one pleasing result, leading baby to perform similar action to get similar results. So, ang kalihian sa secondary o sa tertiary reaction is, sa secondary circular reaction is, kay nakita man sa baby, ang response from the another picture, from the another person, matang iyang gi-continue og repeat na certain na action. While sa tertiary reaction or tertiary circular reaction, na please siya sa response sa iyang gibuhat, mo to iyang gibalik-balik og buhat na nga action. So in the stage 1, there is what we call the object permanence. It is a knowledge that an object continues to exist independent of our seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, or smelling. For example, makadevelop na sila og as a stage 1, makadevelop na sila og object permanence. For example, they realize that the infants or the children learn that things continue to exist even they didn't see the things. For example, the baby and the mother is playing the teddy bear, and then the mommy or the mother hide the teddy bear. At first, the baby thinks that the teddy bear got lost or nawa ang teddy bear. But after he learned nga gitaguan ra di ay sa mama ang teddy bear, manang nakaikuan na siya nga bisag di na makita niya ang teddy bear, pero di na niya makita ang teddy bear, pero ni-exist gihapon siya. So ani na nagsugod ang cognitive development sa baby sa object permanence. And then, before we proceed to the stage 2, let me summarize first the stage 1. So the characteristics of the stage 1 is the infant knows the world through their environment. Or no, the baby or the infant knows the world through their movement and their senses from the word sensory motor, right? Then children learn about the world through basic actions such as grasping, sucking, looking, and listening. And then the baby develop the object permanence, in which they learn that the certain object continue to exist even they cannot be seen. So they are separate beings from the people and objects around them. They realize that their action can cause things to happen in the world around them. And then the key teaching strategies in this stage is developing the object permanence or object constancy, the understanding that objects continue to exist even when they cannot be seen was an important element at this point. So let's proceed to the second stage, the pre-operational stage, ranging from 2 to 7 years old. This stage roughly covers the preschool years of the children. Intelligence at this stage is intuitive in nature. The child can now make mental representations and is able to pretend. The child is now ever closer to the use of symbols. So, ani nga stage, they are something, di ba makakuantaan ang mga bata, bita they are using representations, kana magdua sila, something, ang ilang teddy bear, ilahang doktor-doktoran, mo panay development ani nga stage. And these are the highlights in this stage. The symbolic function, egocentrism, centration, irreversibility, animism, and transductive reasoning. So let's dive in these terms. So first, the symbolic function. This is the ability to represent objects and events. Symbol is a thing that represents something else. So, ano nga stage, they are able or they develop the ability to represent objects and events through symbols. Next is the egocentrism. This is the tendency of the child to only see his point of view and to assume that everyone else has the same point of view. So, ano nga stage, the children believe that everyone has the same point of view as him. So if the child may encounter a opposing point of view, of course, di ba, bata masuko. For example, kanang bata ganahan kayo siya ni Barney, pero kung imuhan siyang biklon nga ingnon si Barney nga na main nga bayot man na si Barney, di ba, masuko kay pagtuon nila dili gyud kay insa na siya dinosaur. Then let's proceed to disintegration. This refers to the tendency of a child to only focus on one aspect of thing or event and exclude other aspects. So, for example, here in this concentration, the child tend to fix on just one point rather than seeing the wider picture. And then next is the irreversibility. Pre-operational children do not have the ability yet to reverse their thinking. So, they are not able to do a reverse thinking. For example is, a baby is playing a balloon. Diba? Of course, before you play a balloon, pabruton man siya na nimo, diba? And then, when the baby got bored, the baby got bored while playing the balloon, instead nga iyahang yuson na ang balon, iyahang gipabuto because wala siya kay bang pwede ra dili siya pa yuson because the baby is not di pa siya makabuhat og reverse thinking. Next is the animism. This is the tendency of children to attribute human-like traits or characteristics to inanimate objects. So, mo ni kung example ganiha nga. The baby is playing a pretend in a teddy bear. Magtayang ay doktor-doktoran, ana. So, dahil sidlayan ang Barbie doll, istorya-istoryahan. So, nga na pa na nga stage, sa stage 2, ang baby. And then, last, the transductive reasoning. This is a pre-operational child's type of reasoning that is neither inductive or deductive. For example, a child's mother comes home every day around 6 o'clock in the evening. When asked why it is already night, the child would say, because my mom is already home. So, another example po, di ba kita sa una mo dong atong mama og sawang. So, every time andi mo dong atong mama og sawang or mulakaw sabay. Muna taga uli sa atong mama na sila gasa. Muna mag-expect nga every jud mulakaw sila na sila gasa or pasalubong. So, in the pre-operational stage, the kids learn to pretend play but still struggle with the logic and taking the point of view of other people. They also often struggle with understanding the idea of constancy. So the children begin to think symbolically and learn to use words and pictures to represent objects. Children at this stage tend to be egocentric and struggle to see things from the perspective of the others. Or that is what we call the egocentrism. Then, while they are getting better with language and thinking, they still tend to think about things in very concrete terms. So, our key teaching strategies in this stage is use a concrete props or visual aids to illustrate lessons and help children understand what is being presented. Give children a great deal of physical practice with the facts and skills that will serve as building blocks for the later development. So, nasabtan ba class? And then, let's proceed to the stage 3, the concrete operational stage ranging 8 to 11 years old. This stage is characterized by the ability of the child to think logically but only in terms of the concrete objects. So in this stage, the child can now start do a logical thinking, but only on the concrete objects. So these are the terms we are going to study: the decentering, reversibility, conservation, and seriation. So first, decentering. This is the ability to pay attention to multiple attributes of an object or situation rather than lacking or lock into attending to only a single attribute. So here, opposite siya sa egocentrism. Diba sa egocentrism, the children tend to they are struggling to see things from the perspective of others. But here in the centering, they can now somewhat understand the perspective of the others. Next is the reversibility, a mental operation that reverses a sequence of events or stores a change of state affairs to the original condition. So, opposite po siya sa irreversibility. So, itong i-continue, itong example, ganiha. Diba? Itong example sa irreversibility, the baby is playing a balloon. So, when he got bored playing, instead ngayon, pahiyusan ra ang balloon is ihang gipaboto. Kaya because in irreversibility, he is not able to do a reverse thinking. But here in reversibility, the child is able to do a reverse thinking already. So, imbes nga yung pabuthon, he was able na to think nga pwede ra din niya pahiuson, di ba? And then, next is the conservation. This is the ability to know that a certain properties of objects like number, mass, volume, or area do not change even if there is a change in appearance. For example, the baby can now, or the children can now realize that a glass from a milk from a short, short, wide, wide glass is the same when you transfer to the long but thin glass. Nakarealize na ang baby nga parihara sa siya og sud. Ang duha parihar ang amount sa milk. Galahi lang o sudlanan. Next is the seriation. This refers to the ability to order or arrange things in series based on one dimension such as weight, volume, or size. So, ano nga stage, the baby can now arrange the tanang mga butang or nasa ilahang palibot based on sa imong ipa-arrange nila like may ka nga okay, arrange this from based on their size from small to big. So in this stage the baby can now arrange that thing. Maka-arrange na siya from small to big or big to small. Pwede po og from lightest to heaviest or heaviest to lightest. So in conclusion, children during this stage, children began to think logically about concrete events. They began to understand the concept of conservation. Like what I said kanina, an example, that the amount of the liquid in a short wide cup is equal to that in the tall skinny glass. Then their thinking becomes more logical and organized but still very concrete. Children begin using inductive logic or reasoning from the specific information to general principle. So our key teaching strategies in this stage is make sure that lectures and reading are brief and well organized. Use familiar examples to help explain more complex ideas so students will have a beginning point for assimilating new information. So compare students' own lives with those on the characters in a story or use story problems in mathematics and then give the opportunities to classify and group objects and ideas on increasingly complex level. So now let's proceed to the last stage, the stage 4, formal operational stage ranging from 12 to 15 years old and so on. So here, individuals can now solve abstract problems and can hypothesize. This stage is characterized by the following: the hypothetical reasoning, analogical reasoning, and the deductive reasoning. So, hypothetical reasoning, this is the ability to come up with a different hypothesis about a problem and to gather and weigh data in order to make a final decision or judgment. So, in this stage or in this last stage, the children can now make his own judgment of a certain situation. So, maka-think logically na ang bata. Nga, nga na, maka-judge na siya sa isa ka situation or isa ka event. Next is the analogical reasoning. This is the ability to perceive the relationship in one instance and then use that relationship to narrow down possible answers in another similar situations. And lastly, the deductive reasoning. This is the ability to think logically by applying a general rule to a particular instance or situation. So, very understandable na ang definition class. So from Piaget's findings and comprehensive theory, we can derive the following principles. Children will provide different explanations of reality at different stages of cognitive development. And then, cognitive development is facilitated by providing activities or situations that engage learners and require adaptation. And third, learning materials and activities should involve the appropriate level of motor or mental operations for a child given age. Avoid asking students to perform tasks that are beyond their current cognitive capabilities. And lastly, use teaching methods that actively involve students and the present challenges. So that will be all for my discussion. So for your activity is I will just post it separately in the Google Classroom. So your assessment will be an essay. So for the further instructions and criteria, just see it in the Google Classroom. And the deadline for that for the assessment will be Tuesday next week. So hopefully mo-pass mo on time class sa kay para di ko magdali-dali o check sa naglas na. So and for your assignment, do an advanced research about our next topic, which is the Lev-Vygotsky's sociocultural theory or the zone of proximal development. So, di ba next week, recorded discussion, gihapon na siya. So, para naamoy, di ba sabot ato 12:30 to 1:30, recorded discussion, gihapon, same ani. So, para na may output ana assignment, in that time, 12:30 to 1:30, sa GC lang, bisag, i-define na rin ninyo, mahatag mo na search ninyo. Just send it in the GC. I-mention lang ko para ma-check na ko, para mahatagan mo na ho grado, para na mo yung output. Ani nga assignment. Masabtan ba class? Kaya, sige, kung naapa mo yung questions, just approach me or sa GC na may mga pangutan na ani nga topic. So, thank you for listening and goodbye.